Hi there, folks. Nick Astor here with South Pole. We're going to give people about a minute to fill on in, and then we'll kick things off. So stand by. Welcome, everybody. I know a few people are still filing in, but we do want to get started in a timely manner, so let's roll. Welcome to today's Climate Shatter. My name is Nick Astor. For those of you not familiar with South Pole, we are one of the world's leading carbon project developers, as well as a sustainability consulting company. We've been around since 2006, founded and headquartered in Zurich, and since then have grown to be a truly global operation in dozens of countries on all continents. We work with hundreds of companies, organizations, and the public sector on reducing their carbon footprints and many other sustainability issues. As I mentioned, my name is Nick Astor, and I'm in charge of marketing for the US and Canada. We at South Pole are very well known for hosting exciting conversations on climate change, as well as its larger relationship to global well-being and the action that companies can take to address it. With the advent of the COVID-19 crisis, we've had to move all of our events online, hence our presence here at today's Climate Chatter. By now, you've been in enough of these online presentations that I think you know the drill, so please do excuse any surprise visits by children, bad lighting, or possible audio glitches. Today's conversation, and we very much intend this to be a conversation, is an exciting one. We've invited Dimitar Vlahov and David Hopkins from South Pole's longtime partner, Sustainable Brands, to talk us through a concept they've developed called the Brand Transformation Roadmap. Specifically, we will be looking at brand transformation through the lens of climate change and how corporate action on climate can ultimately benefit the brand. As I mentioned, we do intend this to be a conversation, so for those of you out there with questions, please don't hold back. You can ask those questions directly into the little question box on the GoToWebinar control panel, or later in the chat if you prefer to raise your hand. You can do that as well, and I can call on you directly and you can speak to us. But the easiest way to do it is to throw those questions in the chat. We'll go through those questions one by one towards the end of the presentation, and we're looking at about probably 30 minutes and then 15 minutes Q&A, and we'll roll from there. Nonetheless, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to David Hopkins. He's going to say a few words on the basics of what Sustainable Brands is all about. And then we'll turn it over to the main event. Dimitar Vlahov is going to talk us through the transformation roadmap, and we're going to have some fun with it. So, David, I'm going to turn the presentation over to you. Let's see if everything works. There you go. And do please unmute your mic.
That'll help. Thank you so much, Nick. Are you able to see my screen here?
Looks terrific.
Okay, great. Well, hello, everyone. Yeah, we are very excited to be here on behalf of Sustainable Brands. My name is David Hopkins, and I am here with my colleague Dimitar, and we represent a leading global collaboration, learning, and communication platform that you may have heard of called Sustainable Brands. We're often best known for our event series, which is similar to the TED Talks of corporate sustainability. We also have other opportunities for corporate engagement on these issues that we're going to talk to you a little bit about today. Our main mission here at Sustainable Brands is to transform the global economy into a more flourishing economy for all. And the way that we do that is a number of opportunities that we offer to the brands that you see here and many others. These are multinational leading brands. And our key differentiator is that we work often from within the brand across the C-suite to foster collaboration, communication, and inspiration to engage and equip leaders towards brand transformation, specifically designed to address social and environmental innovation as the greatest driver for market value generation and market value growth. So how do we do that? Our theory of change is usually the same regardless of who, where, or when we're working on these issues. And it all starts with creating awareness. If you're on this webinar and you know South Pole Group, then you probably are ahead of the curve in this area. This is part of the reasons we work with South Pole and love this partnership so much. We appreciate South Pole for being our official carbon offset partner at all of our events and member meetings. And part of why we joined up was to create that awareness across our community and then moving that into encouraging engagement. And when we engage across sectors and across industries, we find that the resilience that we can build into the community leads us to amplify commitments at a time when we need it most, as we all probably agree on this webinar. And then to ensure co-creation, we look to build community-wide participation and systems thinking based on that collaboration to see solutions that may otherwise have been hidden if we stay in our industry or sector silos. When we do that well, we can shift the system. And that's our mission here. And so Dimitar's going to talk a little bit about that. Before he does, these were our initiatives for 2019 and now 2020 as well, but these were kickstarted in 2019. So just to touch on some of these that you may have heard of if you were at any of our events last year. And these have to do with both internal and external initiatives to drive corporate, social, and environmental innovation forward. The Delivering the Good Life research is a body of research we worked on with Harris Poll. We have the Brands for Good initiative, which works on consumer engagement towards sustainable lifestyle behavior change. We're also launching a new digital presence on our website, and which we'll share more about with you. If you're interested, please let us know. We'd be happy to do that. And then the brand transformation roadmap and why we're here today. So this is a 5x5 matrix on how a company can see their evolution along the sustainability maturity curve. And Dimitar is a resident expert in this, and we will, I'll just pass the mic off to him to do a deep dive into the roadmap today. So thank you so much for being with us.
David, thanks a lot for the intro. We'll get down to business. Dimitar, if you could join us, I will simply make you the presenter. I love how this works. And there it is. All right, everything look good?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to mute myself and let's roll.
Thank you so much, Nick, for having us here today, and thank you, David, for introducing Sustainable Brands. Hi to everyone. My name is Dimitar, and I'm one of the veterans on the Sustainable Brands team, having been with the Sustainable Brands platform for about 8 years now. Served as Director of Content Development and currently leading our Knowledge and Insights function. And in that capacity, I am the co-creator of this tool that I will speak to you a little bit about, the Brand Transformation Roadmap. So let me just give you an introduction of what it is, why we created it, and then that will serve as a conversation and discussion starter. I know Nick, and I'm sure many of you have interesting questions. So very much looking forward to that. I'll probably take maybe about 10-15 minutes, probably about 15 minutes to introduce you to the roadmap. I hope you enjoy it. And so let's dive into it. So we at Sustainable Brands, as David mentioned, we work with hundreds upon hundreds of the world's biggest brands. And a couple of years ago, we paused and asked ourselves, wait, if we have been at this, and we have at Sustainable Brands for over 15 years, and many of these brands have been working on sustainability for various amounts of time, you know, but collectively, quite a bit, of course, and many of them individually quite a lot. So we paused there and asked ourselves, why aren't we sustainable yet? Why aren't all these companies sustainable yet? What's holding them back and us collectively back, and why isn't the sustainable brands community advancing faster on sustainability? So we did a good amount of research on that, and we genuinely wanted our community to answer these questions. And the answers came back, after talking to a few hundred of the most active members of the sustainable brands community. So think chief sustainability officers, chief marketing officers, people who speak at sustainable brands, people who attend sustainable brands, our 80+ corporate member companies, and so forth. All of them combined were in this pool of people we talked to, and these patterns emerged among their answers. Very interesting, and I'm sharing them here because they informed why we created this tool and also why we shaped it the way we did. So the answers were interesting. So our community reported being lost in a variety of ways on their sustainability journey, lost in translation, lost with respect to navigating the huge landscape of solutions and possible next steps, lost sometimes in terms of knowing how best to make the business case for whatever next step they wanted to take on the journey. They reported also having some trouble looking for the right partners, externally, certainly in terms of solution providers, whether it's on climate action, of course, which is what we're focusing on here today, or any other sustainability issue, but also internal partners across departments, across big multinational organizations. They also felt that they needed more validation for potential next steps they could be taking, more validation from peers. Of course, a lot of that does happen already on platforms like Sustainable Brands, certainly, and through networks like South Pole's network. But still, that was still a need they felt was not met entirely. And then finally, the fourth bullet here refers to a very interesting sense of complacency that we detected in some of our brands, reporting that they feel that they're doing enough, that they're quite far along the sustainability journey, have accomplished some great things, and don't necessarily feel that they need to be doing much more. And so when we reflected on these patterns among the answers from several hundred companies, we realized these are essentially all problems of orientation and navigation. And so this is why we decided to create an orientation and navigation tool that maps out the whole journey, right? The whole sustainability journey. And by sustainability, we definitely mean environmental sustainability, social sustainability, changes in governance that could and should be happening. So it's a very all-inclusive definition of sustainability. So a tool that maps out the whole journey so as to help with all these problems of orientation and navigation. And we started with the destination. If we're going to be mapping out the whole journey, well, let's look at what a sustainable brand really is, and then construct the journey from business as usual all the way to becoming a sustainable brand. And so worked with our global advisory board, all the best thinking out there, consulted all the best literature, etc., and kind of came up with this definition of a sustainable brand, which boils down to these 5 most key characteristics. It's not the whole story, but these 5 are really the pillars that together make up a sustainable brand. So you need all of them together, and you need to have achieved all of them fully to be able to refer to your company as a sustainable brand. So you see what they are here. I'll just list them really quickly. The first one is to have a well-articulated, embedded, and fully activated positive social and/or environmental purpose, clearly defined and activated all the way across all stakeholder groups. Then the second one is to exert the kind of brand influence that it reaches systemically, advocating for systemic solutions. So going beyond the typical marketing, communications, and PR sort of piecemeal strategies, but into a holistic brand influence that aims to reach and affect the whole system. Then number three, hugely important characteristic of a sustainable brand is to do no harm to the environment or society in any way. And not only that, but to be regenerative with respect to a lot of the damage that unfortunately business has already done to the planet. So in a similar spirit, number four is to create the kinds of products and services that result in sustainable and going beyond that, net positive outcomes across the whole life cycle of the products and services in question. And finally, transparent and proactive governance that not only does not conflict or interfere with any of the previous four, but in fact supports them fully and unconditionally. So if you have all these five, you are a sustainable brand. And of course, it doesn't take much reflection to realize that nobody's really there, and that's okay. We're all on a journey. You know, even the Patagonias and Unilevers of the world are not quite there. I would say, for example, if we think just for a moment about Patagonia, they're, you know, they're doing really, really well on purpose and brand influence. They've taken great steps around supply chain and product innovation, but they're not all the way there yet. You know, on characteristics 3 and 4 here. Really strong on 1, 2, and 5. So even they are not a fully sustainable brand according to this definition. So then, and this is the 5x5 matrix that David referred to a few minutes ago. The core of the brand transformation roadmap framework is starting to think about the whole journey, right, in each of the 5 areas informed by the 5 key characteristics of a sustainable brand I just shared with you. In each of these 5 areas, what does the journey look like from level 1 here, you know, that denotes business as usual, conventional, doing nothing about sustainability, all the way to level 5, which is the, you know, the destination, becoming a sustainable brand, as I just described it. So that's the core of the framework. Of course, the most important thing that is the most valuable aspect of this work is what's missing in this slide. It's the content of all the boxes, right? Of all the 25 boxes. What are, in other words, the key milestones, the key descriptors of maturity and capacity building along the way at each level that that help you progress and advance and be set up to advance on to the following level. Just really quickly, here are a few kind of shortcuts in terms of thinking of what it really means to be at these levels across all the 5 areas that I just shared. So, you know, as the company progresses up the levels, prioritizing sustainability becomes more and more important. So that becomes more and more tied to strategy. All right, so it goes from non-strategic to being strategic, all the way to being not only strategic but a top priority for the company. Similarly, action on social and environmental impacts, right, go from scattered or isolated into streamlined and very much connected to direction from the top of the company or the C-suite to being completely and thoroughly embedded across all teams and activated as a rule. Similarly, a company kind of transitions from being more reactive to regulation or stakeholder demands to being, you know, kind of catching up at first, and then importantly becoming a proactive player within the system, within its industry, and within the broader economy on its most material environmental and social issues. And then the horizon, the time horizon of that of planning on any level typically changes as well, of course, from short to medium to the long term, right? So you can see the kind of adjectives here that describe what a company would typically look like with respect to its sustainability journey at these levels. Of course, I've quickly marked just 3 of the levels here, right? Clearly, level 2 and 4 are missing, but you can kind of extrapolate from what's here. So hopefully that gives a good idea of the whole journey as a schematic, at least, right? across all these 5 areas, which really together capture holistically what it takes to advance toward becoming a sustainable brand. I know we have the intention today to focus on climate action in particular, and it makes all the sense in the world given South Pole's work. And so I will spend a few minutes on this slide here, which kind of applies some of the most important characteristics of this brand transformation roadmap to climate action. So showing how climate action shows up across the 5 practice areas and how it evolves from levels 2 to level 5. You can see that I've skipped level 1 because, again, that's business as usual. So it goes without saying, not much is happening there typically. Just looking at purpose to begin with, and again, with respect to climate action, and with the caveat that this is not the whole story at all. In any of these areas, these are just examples of the way that it evolves. But you know, the whole journey, as well as everything that it takes to be at each level, is a much longer story. But as an appetizer here, you know, starting with the purpose area, we see at first. There needs to be a positive purpose that's well defined and that's aligned with climate action, whether it calls it explicitly or not. It needs to be in general alignment with the climate movement. Then at level 3, that purpose starts to get prioritized in marketing, communications, PR, and other ways in which the purpose shows up in the company's interactions with its stakeholders. And then it is activated across all departments at level 4. So an emerging leader, think of someone who's a leader in their industry and starting to show up as one of the, you know, most effective advocates on climate in the whole economy, even not only in its industry, would function in such a way that all of its teams are aligned and fully activated on applying the purpose that in this case is aligned with climate action. And so it evolves. When we look at brand influence, at first, climate or, you know, references to climate action may be missing altogether for marketing and communications. Then that gets started. Then they become regular, and regular actors, and with a consistent voice, which also then builds onto not only regular and consistent, but also agile stakeholder engagement that is quick to react to what's currently happening around climate action. Quick to react to any new context that may arise at the intersection of climate and other issues, and so on and so forth. Then, of course, that cements sector leadership, and you see how it evolves from there. In operations and supply chain, the work starts with scope 1 improvements, moves on to scope 2 focus and action. At that point, hopefully a company starts to move the needle on its own scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. Then scope 3, of course, with science-based targets at level 4. And a level 5 brand would be openly and clearly on a journey toward being net positive with respect to carbon. In products and services, at level 2, a company may not even have, as just getting started on this work, it may not even have any significant product level assessment of its climate impact. And then typically level 3, we see a life cycle assessment, an LCA of a big or even typically representative set of products, maybe even all products. And level 4 behaviors typically involve redesigning more deeply products and services, especially focusing on the use phase, what happens at the end of life. More radical and more, sort of deeper changes there with respect to cutting carbon footprint even deeper. And then a level 5 company would be a leader on regeneration, circularity, and or similarly ambitious approaches that are consistent with its ambition to be a net positive influence on carbon. And then finally, a quick look at the governance dimension. At the beginning of the journey, basic things like just reporting, basic sustainability and carbon reporting, sure. However, at level 3, there should be no conflict between lobbying or any public policy influence the company may have out there. So that should be aligned with climate action, no conflict between that and its purpose, the company's purpose, or any actions in the other areas. At that stage, usually at level 3, the C-suite is engaged and strongly leading on certainly climate and whatever other material sustainability issues the company may prioritize. And then levels 4 and 5 behaviors would, again, tackle climate action at much more fundamental, deeper levels, such as engaging in truly integrated multi-capital analysis and reporting, and from there, planning and decision making overall. That usually involves carbon pricing, internal carbon pricing, if nothing else, up until the highest level of achievement, where in the governance area, the company is going far beyond its own walls, again, to proactively work together collectively with others, with the rest of its sector and other leaders on evolving the whole system in capitalism itself, because we know that's necessary in a variety of ways if we are to truly slow down and eventually reverse climate change. So, so just a quick look at the kind of evolution that takes place and in each of the 5 areas. Now, again, these are just crumbs, right? Just quick looks at the types of milestones and behaviors that are typical for each level. The full story at each level is bigger and cannot be contained on a slide. But when you look at, if you were looking at the full story of what the journey involves at each level, then that puts the whole journey into context. That helps with orientation and navigation questions we mentioned earlier, not just with respect to climate, but with respect to the full journey, all of a given company's most material, environmental, and social issues. These are just some companies that I believe particularly excel at trying to be active and advancing holistically across all 5 areas, right? So across purpose and brand influence, operations and supply chain, products and services, and governance. And we can chat more about how and why we admire their work. But that integrated nature of the journey is certainly a strength for all of them. And just to bring it all back together before we launch into a conversation about this, the value of this tool, of which you only saw glimpses, when you have the whole tool, the whole journey in front of you, the value is that you can see the whole journey and you can see where your company is in that context of the whole journey in each of the 5 areas. You can then use that as a conversation starter and as an engagement tool, both inside your company, to begin a conversation with other departments, to begin a conversation with the leadership of your company, to begin a conversation with any other stakeholder, to train employees and engage them, and so forth. as well as similarly with external stakeholders to engage your customers, consumers, suppliers, investors, and others as your priorities may be, and to talk about that collective nature of progress that is very inherent to levels 4 and 5 in particular, right? So the more you advance on the journey, the more it becomes a collective game, and the more you need external stakeholders to understand the context, to understand where you are in the journey and all of it. And of course, it can help set goals in context of where you are, right? And find the right partners again in context, right? So that may differ from level to level, and it really helps to have that in mind, and to have a common language with the rest of the ecosystem as you navigate it. So if you're level 2, you have certain conversations in all 5 areas, and if you're level 4, you have some very different conversations leading to different goals and different partners. And so that context setting is really critical here. Yeah, so so much more that we could say about this, but I rushed through it a little bit, just aiming to stay on time. But that's all I had for a quick introduction to the roadmap, certain applications of how you can think of it in terms of in the context of climate action and its sort of value overall. Thanks everyone. Roadmap@sustainablebrands.com if you have further questions. But Nick, back to you.
Great, Tamir, that was terrific. I'm a big fan of this whole concept. I think it sort of, it helps people wrap their minds around the whole journey. And here at South Pole, we also use that terminology. We call it the climate journey, which we can get into as well. But go back to the slide that had the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on it. I just thought that's a terrific one to look at. Each of these, you guys did a really good job of clarifying these different possible steps. We do have some questions rolling in, and for those of you who would like to continue asking questions, just get into the little question box there and type it right in. Let's see here, we got question number 1, a little bit more specific on climate, kind of access points to getting started with this whole journey. What have you found that companies have found the most bang for their buck in terms of climate action, in terms of looking through this framework that you guys have here? What have been the big wins for people that are looking to take some action on climate?
One of the big wins, and that I think has become apparent to brands engaging with this tool, is that you can accomplish as a company a lot more if you have the awareness and the ambition to act in all of these 5 areas, or at least in multiple, let's say 4 of the 5 areas, or ideally all 5, rather than in just 1 or 2. So a lot of companies would very naturally, start with operations and supply chain and products and services. These are, for climate action in particular, these are the 2 most common places where you go when you start thinking about what to do about climate, and that's great, and that's a very natural start. But then the realization that a lot can be accomplished if you continue acting on those, right? But you also think about how to leverage your brand influence, all the different types of activation of your purpose. Even if your purpose is not explicitly about climate, it often is, aligned or adjacent. And similarly with governance. So what you can accomplish when you pair them up in new ways or expand the scope to all 5 areas of action. And that's actually one of the differentiating characteristics of this tool, is that it looks at all 5 areas, right? There are other tools and other maps out there that will focus on operations and supply chain or products and services, and that's great, and focus in great detail, and that's fantastic. That's complementary value. But here we're like, okay, let's zoom out a little bit and look at the whole thing and how they interact. So how all these 5 areas interact is very interesting. Just one example, and then we can go to the next question. Mm-hmm. So for example, obviously you can accomplish a lot, again, through operations, supply chain, products and service innovation. But, if you look at level 5 of brand influence, that starts to get it. So at that point, you've used marketing, comms, and PR muscles, not only to activate purpose and to be a leader and a very strong voice. But you now at level 5 at brand influence, you're working on behavior change and big questions of how markets and industries are designed or interacting to begin with, to try and tackle emissions that way. So consumer behavior change, huge, obviously, as we all know. If we can change that, as our Brands for Good initiative is trying to do, change consumer behavior at scale, then that unlocks a lot more potential achievements on climate. But you wouldn't have gotten there if you didn't have the whole picture and how it all connects, and if you're only focusing strictly on, let's say, up to scope 2 operations and traditional.
Hey, Dimitra, I'd love to chime in here too, Nick, quickly to chime in on 2 case studies, I guess, that we could look at. One are an umbrella brand that has a lot of subsidiaries that's rolling out the brand transformation roadmap across their portfolio of brands, who said, and this is a household name that anyone on this call will recognize, who said the brand transformation roadmap is becoming a key tenet of our sustainability vision. It creates a common language and understanding of what leadership looks like on the journey to becoming a sustainable brand and business. And they're able to compare and contrast using a metrics and measurement based system that this offers across brands, the strengths and weaknesses with it from within. The second case study is a partner I can name, an account I work closely with, Forest Stewardship Council, FSC. And FSC is helping to roll out the brand transformation roadmap with many of their members. And they're starting in one country in Europe, and we're looking to roll that out on a more international basis, using this tool, again, as a conversation starter to create alignment and consensus across their member brands. So you can either use this if you're a brand, or in FSC's case, if you're a solution provider and a service provider, in this case, an NGO certification. But we have advertising agencies using this, and communications agencies and consultants and LCA providers to roll this out with their existing clients. So those are 2 use cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, let's keep rolling, and we'll get to everybody's questions. Keep them coming. I got a question from Nina. The question is, what would your advice be to companies who don't yet have a clear journey? In other words, they may be reluctant to get out and talk about what they're doing. If they were to talk about what they were doing, they might make a bigger splash than they think. I'll actually just boldly send all of our contact information to Nina here, and everyone can see that there. That's my personal email address, and also Dimitra and David, the roadmap email address there as well. I mean, at the end of the day, talk to us. We have all kinds of ideas. I think the short answer, and there may be differences in terms of different industries. Some industries want to make a bigger splash than others. Some have a higher risk of being called out for greenwashing and things like that. But in general, be humble, be honest, admit that you don't have a guaranteed trajectory, but you have taken these first steps, and then be open to asking people for feedback. And in general, just be humble about it, and you'll find that I think you'll get a far more positive response than you think. I'm sure you guys have some ideas on that as well.
Yeah, we're big believers in progress over perfection, and that authenticity is key in this work. And Dimitra, you come across this all the time in your post brand transformation roadmap self-assessment review calls with brands, where this comes up a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. So yeah, I mean, at that, just to give my quick thought on the question, at that early stage, so that describes roughly a level 2 or early level 2, maybe even between level 1 and level 2, a level of maturity in terms of stakeholder engagement and communication and scope of the work anyway. So at that point, it's all about again figuring out how to convince decision makers or executives in the company to activate more of the 5 areas than the company currently has activated, and especially the brand influence and purpose dimensions in terms of starting to tell the story, right? Especially if the story is maybe a little more advanced. Maybe it's level 3 already in operations, supply chain, or elsewhere, but it's not there as a holistic story, and the dots have not been connected. That's what it sounded like from the question. So at that point, it's a lot about just being a good internal change agent and advocate for connecting more of the dots and starting to tell more of the story, and starting to see how to link up all the 5 areas, and if they're at very different levels, to start to talk to executives exactly about that issue itself. That why are we at level 3 on operations but level 1 on brand influence and purpose? Well, let's catch up on brand influence and purpose. Okay, well, how do we catch up? Well, let's see what the roadmap says. All right, well, we need a clearly defined purpose and this and that and that and that, and then you sort of work through the list. And so that would be a good approach.
Good. I got a question here from Arati. In your experience, have you seen consumers pay a higher price for sustainable products and services? And maybe I'll add a little caveat to that. I mean, part of our whole, we've had this conversation a million times over the years. I mean, our often stated intention is that sustainable products and services shouldn't actually cost more. Sometimes they may in the short run, but still, have you, your response to the question?
It's a mixed bag. It's a little bit of a lot of things out there, but we are seeing more and more examples in a stronger trend toward more, the reduction of that sustainability premium. In other words, more sustainable products and services don't tend to cost more increasingly now. They did more in the past. I would say, 5-10 years ago it was a little different, and there was that premium when it came to price, but less and less so. And as people who have the privilege to have inside looks into the kitchens of many household brands, your Procter and Gamble's, your Targets, your many others, I can tell you that they many are now intentionally, many of those brands are intentionally working on figuring out how to make their products and services more sustainable without increasing the price, and in some cases even reducing it, interestingly. So that's again, if we think of it in terms of roadmap sort of placement, that would be high level 3, level 4. That's a level 4 kind of behavior where you're redesigning, let's say, focus on products and services level 4. You're redesigning more deeply now, and so price is not written here into this box and on my slide, but that would be if you extend the list, that would be in there, right? So that's deeper redesign. Yeah.
And Dimitar, part of the work that you've done around our New Metrics conference, which usually happens in November, and is focused around operationalizing ESG, environmental, social governance, best practices, has been the focus on shifting from this single bottom line to triple bottom line, or multi-capital, or quadruple bottom line, a multi-capital scorecard approach. And not only is the brand transformation to sustainability and climate action a journey and a roadmap, but the macro level of our economy, the move of the capitalistic system to price out properly if we internalize the externalities into the cost structure, whether that's measuring pollution or negative social and supply chain impacts that are not responsibly sourced products, et cetera. If we internalize those costs then sustainability will bring costs down significantly. We're not there yet, so that is a hypothetical for now, but it is a journey to get to that point, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely it is. Yeah, that's that now refers to the collective nature of that journey. A company, determining its price, the price of its products and services alone in isolation can't accomplish all that. It can do multi-capital accounting and all of it still, but it may not be as effective if it wasn't the norm, and if it wasn't some of these externalities and other things were not tackled on a more collective level. So yes, that is absolutely the cutting edge of that work, looking at integrated multi-capital accounting, and from there, decision making, reporting, and all of it. And then from there, how do you tackle the externalities and others on a systems level beyond just the four walls of a single company? Absolutely, yeah.
Good, good. I want to summarize a couple of the next questions. We talked about pricing there. We talked about accounting for externalities, and then of course we talked about what the role of the consumer, the end consumer, is here in terms of making a decision. To what extent do consumers really drive this? To what extent have you seen that? Have the brands come back to you and said, yes, you know, this action is happening because our customers are asking for it, and or they're rewarding us for having taken this action, or are there other drivers at play?
There's a rich bouquet of factors at play, and you know that interaction is really interesting to sort of untangle. It differs a little bit by industry and by context, but by and large, consumers haven't been I would say, the biggest driver of this. And in fact, often the brands have to be the one initiating in that relationship between brand and consumer. The brand has to be the one initiating sort of nudges or even bigger steps toward more sustainable consumption, more sustainable lifestyles, as we mentioned.
That's tough to do though, right? I mean, you're kind of flipping the relationship there a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in fact, right. So we have this as part of one of our bodies of research. We have a report called the Pull Factor Report. That's informing our Brands for Good consumer engagement work. And that pull factor is named that way precisely for this reason, because it's in the push and pull, the pulling consumers toward more sustainable behaviors and lifestyles, and from there toward more sustainable products and services to meet and be consistent with those sustainable lifestyles is something that many brands are working on. But in that case, it's the brand pulling the consumer, hence the name, in that direction. So it's a mix, I would say. If we left it completely to consumers, it wouldn't happen as quickly as it does when the brands are more proactive, which we're seeing now as a trend currently.
Mm-hmm. I'd be remiss if I didn't, discuss sort of the world at hand. I'm really hoping the conference happens in December, by the way. We're still planning on coming out there and seeing you guys in person. But, just to bring that up, I mean, we have a pandemic going on right now. We have a tremendous amount of social unrest here in the United States. Lots of complicated, swirling issues at hand. Climate change is continuing to, be a sort of specter on top of all of this stuff. Let's just say capitalism isn't working for everyone. Let's just see if you can give us a big picture, within all of that context. How is this roadmap helping companies address this whole big picture, and save us, Dimitar?
Wow, no pressure there. No, but even though the scope of the questions is a bit intimidating, it's absolutely a fair question and something we work on a lot. So happy to outline my thoughts really quickly here, and then happy to chat about any aspect of this further. But essentially, one way in which this roadmap and a platform like Sustainable Brands is trying to be helpful and being helpful is by kind of showing how to honestly expect and work on all of the above in a systematic way. So in other words, if any one company, any one industry, us collectively as a society really did our homework, let's say with respect to, frankly, almost every issue that's currently in the news in a big way, with, let's say, pandemics. If we really did our homework with respect to pandemics, we would have respective scenario planning and other capacities and preparedness in place that helps us address that. And how that shows up, I mean, it's not shown on this slide, it's not shown, here, but how that would show up is in the roadmap. In this, if you start reaching a level 2, level 4, level 3, level 4, level of maturity, then that question of preparedness, thinking systemically, thinking about the big picture in a really integrated way starts getting key. And so you start to, if you really want to become level 4 and from there level 5, you start to be able to anticipate and prepare more systemically for things like pandemics and whatever they mean to your business. So that's one way to think of it, one answer. By the way, similarly in governance and in supply chain relationships, things like racial and social justice and equity come up a lot. So you don't need the unfortunate events that we're seeing. You don't need that as a reminder to work on racial and social justice and equity, right? Diversity and inclusion. You would have, again, if you truly did your homework and you were aware of the whole journey and all it takes and what it takes to excel at governance, you would know that diversity, inclusion, and equity is a big part of that journey, and that starts becoming really important around level 3, and certainly can't be level 4 and 5 without it. And so you would be acting anyway on that before that's in the news, or regardless of whether it's in the news. And so all this to say that imagine if all companies were sort of trying to be preemptive and proactive like that, following this roadmap or any similar processes, then that would systemically reduce the severity of a lot of those issues. Obviously, the biggest one of them all being climate, right?
Good. I got one last question for you, unless somebody jumps in quick. Back to climate as sort of one of these meta issues that sort of encompasses many others. What are you guys doing as an organization, in terms of the conference, in terms of the corporate network and so on, to drive action specifically on climate change? And I'll throw something in there. What can South Pole do to help move the ball along?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, all of our events and activities are carbon neutral, thanks to our carbon offset partner, South Pole Group. So there you go. We can start there. And beyond that, our theory of change is that we are contributing above all indirectly, but in a big way, by equipping and empowering brands to be more effective in their own work and in their own advancement and innovation in all these 5 areas. And then from there, if they get it right, or to the extent that they get it right, then that of course will have systemic implications out there. So it's the domino effect is a big part of our theory of change. So we're focused on equipping the brands and the executives and change agents within them, and then they of course then reduce their emissions and the scopes and all that. So then it becomes a bigger overall effect from there. Would love if you have anything to add, Nick or David.
Yeah,
that does it for me. David, yeah, jump in.
I would also mention our efforts to divert waste, reduce water, the obvious things, recycling, composting at our events. We also have been a remote workforce for quite a while now, for over a year preceding the pandemic. So that cuts down our footprint. And I would also say that the work that we do in consumer and employee sustainable lifestyle behavior shifts should be mentioned as well. Micro actions that we can each take, and we're working with a partner called WeSpire, and it was part of our Brands for Good initiative to roll that out with our partners as well as ourselves internally on activating our own workforce to share and to inspire each other on what we're doing, because we're all here because we share a passion, as I'm sure everyone today on the call do too. And that's what we're here to do, is to move that conversation forward as a community, as a tribe, to address these issues and to step up each in our own ways and feel empowered to do so.
Well said. Well, I want to thank both of you guys for taking the time today to share all this with us. I can't wait to hopefully see you guys in person at some point. those of you interested, we have another chatter coming up on Thursday. Visit the URL on the screen, southpole.com/climate chatter with a hyphen in there. It's all about how to finance green COVID-19 recovery. We're going to get into the concept of climate funds. If you don't know what that is, all the more reason to tune in and check it out. Do feel free to contact me directly and aster@southpole.com. We're going to be filling up the next couple of months with a lot more of these conversations. We welcome your ideas for conversations to be had, and we certainly hope you'll stop in and check out our schedule and continue to join us. So without further ado, guys, I think we'll call that a wrap.
Thank you, Nick. We really appreciate being here.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks, everyone. Would love to continue the conversation if
Please
anyone
feel free to reach out. Yeah.
Marvelous. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.